So, good evening, everyone. Welcome to this talk and meditation. So this evening, my subject is the animus and the anima. These are concepts developed by Jung. I'm sure that most people have heard of them, but they're quite complex. And I thought I would discuss them tonight. I've never heard Sri Mataji mention them, but she mentioned Jung approvingly up to a point. And I feel these concepts, or something very like them, are definitely useful to us and should be more widely known. Most of what I'm going to say here is based on the writings of Jung and his great colleague, Marie-Louise von France. But some of it consists of my own thoughts and observations on the subject, and my attempt to figure out what the anima and animus might mean. So I wouldn't take this as a strictly Jungian essay on the subject. So what are these things, the anima and the animus? I suppose a starting point might be with the idea that although we are all human beings, we are at the same time divided into two kinds of human being, male and female. I mean, that's obvious, but it mightn't have been like that. Why not create single, complete, self-reproducing entities of one kind only? Wouldn't it be so much simpler? But no, some of us are men, some are women. I'm ignoring for tonight the further division into multiple genders that's so fashionable nowadays. Of course, this division into two interrelated kinds of human being gives life a dynamic. It drives it forward. But the fact that I, for example, am a man has an unfortunate side effect in that it makes me a partial, incomplete human being. I lack the feminine qualities, the feminine orientation to the world. Here, I'm ignoring something else, the feminist assertion that actually there are no distinct feminine qualities and no distinct feminine orientation to the world, and that if these seem to be essential things, essences, that's only because of our cultural conditioning. We've been taught to perceive the world that way. But I'm taking it, and I think that most of us listening would agree, that there are definitely essential differences between men and women. To put it very broadly, although of course these differences are more or less marked in each individual case. Okay, so I'm a man, I'm partial, I'm incomplete, I lack the feminine qualities, but according to Jung, and of course, according to my own experience within myself, I contain an undeveloped, relatively unconscious feminine aspect. And this is what he called the anima. And the same with a woman. She contains within herself an unrealized masculine counterpart, which he called the animus. Now, the anima and the animus are not simple mirror images of one another, just as I and my wife, for example, are not simple mirror images of each other. The anima has its own moods, methods, and aims, while the animus has its separate moods, methods, and aims. At this point, it might be worth asking, what kind of things are they, this anima and animus? They're not organs or plexuses, no autopsy will reveal them. In fact, they're not exactly things as we think of things as having definite dimensions, things that can be described fairly exactly, defined fairly easily. These are archetypes in the unconscious. And because of this, we can never quite define them ultimately. We can't quite get to the bottom of them. And the more you think about them, the more they can swim out of focus. As I've been finding during the last week or so, while I've been thinking about this, one day you think, I've got it, I understand completely what these things are. And the next day, It all seems vague, and you wonder, well, do we actually need these concepts? But I do feel that they are useful, they do have a value, and they can help us in our work of introspection, which of course is an important part of Sahaja Yoga. Now, the main is that they are to be integrated into our conscious personality. And that way, we become whole people, people who are not divided in themselves. Maybe I should mention at this point another Jungian archetype with which most of us are familiar. This is the shadow, which also has to be transformed and integrated if this wholeness is to be achieved, but we can discuss that another time. So I have to integrate, I have to bring into consciousness my anima and integrate its qualities into my actual being. And this is the point, but it's not at all straightforward. To begin with, what generally happens as we grow up is that instead of being integrated, these anima and animus are projected outside onto other people. So a young man's anima will get projected onto a girl. She may be quite a common person, yet in his mind she's surrounded by this magical emotional aura of the feminine. The situation is complicated by the different modes of the anima. Jung described, he divided these, I think perhaps too neatly, and he didn't really talk about this too much, but he divided them into four. Eve, Helen of Troy, the Virgin Mary, and Sophia were types of the anima. And he saw this format as being repeated in something that was very important to him, Goethe's Faust. And there he sees the forms of Gretchen, Helen again, Helen of Troy, the Virgin Mary, and the eternal feminine as being these four modalities of the anima. The first stage, Eve, is purely functional, biological, as earthy as you like. The second stage, Helen, is, to quote, still dominated by the sexual eros, but on an aesthetic and romantic level, where woman has already acquired some value to the man as an individual. The third stage raises eros to the heights of religious devotion. This is Virgin Mary. And the fourth stage goes even further. So the young man whose anima is projected onto a girl may see her as partly a kind of Eve form, partly Helen, mainly Helen perhaps, but also partly as the mother. He looks to her for softness, comfort, all the good qualities associated with home, but also as an object of carnal desire. It can be very, very confusing. He wants an ideal romantic object, and he wants an ideal mother. It's all mixed up, and also it tends to be very vague, dream. And the nature and the power of his anima also depends on his own individual background, his parents, his connection with them, and so on. And of course, his anima rarely has much to do with the character of the person onto whom it's projected. So this confusion of the anima needs to be sorted out. And this is why Jung talked about the importance of a man differentiating his anima. So bringing it out into the open and understanding what kind of anima it is, what it's trying to do. In practice, the young man, if he has a sort of split anima, as it's called, with these different kinds of anima all mixed together, he may never actually approach the girl in question, the recipient of his anima, because as well as being an object of desire, she may also have some of the holiness of the higher form of the anima in his mind. She seems too special, too far above him for him to speak to, and when he's near her, he seems to be walking on holy ground, although other boys don't seem to have this same perception of her at all and have no trouble talking to her, and so on. It all depends on the individual. And when the anima has moved on, found someone else to be projected onto, the young man suddenly wonders what on earth he ever saw in the girl with whom his anima was entangled before. Gradually, hopefully, the anima is projected less and less, and at the same time, the young man begins to see women as real individuals who aren't standing on pedestals, or not completely, and are as real as him, if he is real. So in a way, we can say that through these projections, the anima is trying to draw attention to itself as something that is the man's own unrealized quality. And he has to understand and acknowledge this through experience. The same process happens with the animus. Naive women, for example, with an undeveloped nature, often find their animus projected onto very masculine men, dangerous men, instead of developing their own ability to take responsibility for themselves and to set themselves goals and so on. Their masculine side is projected onto men who give the impression of being very sure of themselves. Anthony Daniels, I often refer to him, who worked as a prison psychiatrist, tells us that the villains with whom he worked, really brutal ones, never had any trouble finding women once they were outside again. It's just, a certain kind of woman is attracted to this dangerous type who's obviously going to abuse her. And it seems mystifying to other people, but it's not. It's because of the animus. When the animus is projected, the woman in question may behave just like the man's anima. So she becomes very feminine, maybe very irrational, very pliable. Marilyn Monroe, of course, made a profession out of acting out this male fantasy of the anima, both on screen and in her private life. But we shouldn't necessarily feel too sympathetic about this, because actually it's a way of getting power over men. It's a sort of negative domination. You're so soft and sweet and so on. But where does it lead? In her case, it led nowhere. So this interplay of animus and anima projections gives the people concerned, the real people, this idea that they've fallen in love. I mean, it's more than an idea. It's a very powerful experience that feels completely real to them, more real than normal, ordinary life. But as Jung says, as archetypes, these figures, the anima and animus, are semi-collective and impersonal qualities. And so when we feel that something is really real, we're really in love, so we may, in fact, be acting out a kind of impersonal or semi-impersonal drama. And when we come up against the problems of the ordinary world, suddenly it doesn't seem so real anymore. Because we don't have a real relationship with the other person. We're just experiencing it at one remove, this relationship between the anima and animus. Although, I should say, it's always possible that such romances can develop into something more real. One feels this is so with Romeo and Juliet. Romeo, at the beginning of the play, he just projects his anima right, left, and center. And it bounces back on him. He slips into this anima mood, into this sort of dreamy, aloof, bipolar state. Now he's sort of languid, and then suddenly he becomes overactive. This is typical of the anima mood. Then he falls for Juliet, and she for him. And there's something real there, I think, although it isn't allowed to develop because neither of them really get a chance to integrate the anima and animus qualities to any extent, and disaster results before they can do that. Speaking of an African fairy tale where, against all advice, a man searches for and finds someone outside his own tribe to marry, and it all ends badly. Von Franz comments that this story shows why in primitive life there are such stringent marriage taboos, which prevent one from marrying the projections of one's own anima or animus. Individual choice is made impossible for that reason. This precaution is necessary because their ego consciousness is not strong enough yet to deal with the whole problem of the anima and animus. All the stories of these African stories dealing with the anima and animus end tragically, she says. Either the woman disappears, the mermaid returns to the sea, that's not African, but it's a very similar kind of fairy tale, or there follows a complete catastrophe. It is important to understand this, she adds, this is Marie-Louise von France, because we can see it in people today who blindly marry an anima or animus projection, which then leads to a situation where the couple isn't able to deal with the problem. And that's what happens in Romeo and Juliet. Juliet declines her arranged marriage to Paris, a chap called Paris, and goes off instead with her animus projection, Romeo. Shakespeare's attitude towards this is very subtle. He could have chosen to make it all work out and give them a happy ending, but no, he doesn't. Yet he makes us see the tragedy with almost comical detachment. We're to learn something from. So that's projection, but the anima can also possess the man. I mean, we can talk of a positive and a negative anima and animus. Instead of being projected outward, it's as if it turns around and projects itself onto him, as if he's staring at it in a mirror. In this state, where the subject is possessed to one extent or another by his anima, he feels very emotional, often in a vague, dreamy way, a sort of depressive way, but also enjoying the melancholia. Jung defined the masculine as the ability to know one's goal and do what is necessary to achieve it. Therefore, when he's possessed by his feminine anima, the man's ability to act in the real world is hampered. It seems too harsh, too brutal a place to want to be in. He may be inflated with various vague ideas that he will put into practice one day, or he retreats into dreamland, perhaps with the help of drink or drugs, and he can go up and down, suddenly becoming impatient, then relapsing into lethargy like Romeo. There's a Romanian fairy tale called The Lad and His Fate. In this, as usual, a king has 3 sons, and he tells them that now that they're grown up, it's time for them to go out into the world and find themselves brides. The 2 elder boys do so without much trouble, but the youngest son isn't sure what he wants. He drifts along in a daydream until he comes to a pool, out of which a tortoise appears. There's something magical about this tortoise, and sure enough, the boy is entranced by it. Then the tortoise does a somersault and turns into a beautiful girl. Now, there are quite a few fairy tales which tell a story along similar lines. The 3 boys are told to shoot an arrow each, and where it lands, hopefully not right on top of her, there they will find their bride. The 2 elder brothers find suitable girls, but the youngest son in these stories always finds a frog or a monkey or some kind of animal. But secretly, the animal is an enchanted princess, far superior in every way to his brother's brides, and this all comes out at the end. In this tale, though, The Lad and His Fate, it never becomes clear whether the tortoise is really a girl or is only one in the boy's imagination. Anyway, when he wants to bring her to the court to be married and show the others how beautiful she is, she says, okay, but first of all, it is our custom where I come from to have a ritual bath first. He says, that's fine, you can do it in my father's castle. But she says, no, no, I'm going to do it here. And she takes the boy by his hand and steps back into the pool, and he steps into it, and he feels a chill. Is this right? But she's so lovely. And he goes down into the pool, and that's it. He never reappears. So here the anima is a negative anima, acting like a vampire, sucking all the boy's willpower, his masculinity out of him. This is obviously left-sidedness, and it's anima possession to a point where boots can come in, obviously. And the boy should try to get out of it by acting in some small, doable way. Of course, obviously, from our point of view, he should meditate and work on his left side as well. But here I'm mainly concerned with the introspection part of it, trying to understand what is happening to us with these feminine and masculine sort of inferior sides to our conscious being, and why we repeat the patterns of behavior that we sometimes do, and so on. Similarly, there's animus possession. So this is when a woman becomes possessed with her negative animus, or it becomes a negative animus at that point. She can become very argumentative, very adamant in the way she argues. Because the animus is her masculine element, it argues in a rationalistic way, except that it's not really rational or logical, because it doesn't have a disinterested concern for evidence, facts, or logic. It just wants to win the argument at all costs. It wants to score points. The animus imitates masculine rationality, but does so from outside. It's like someone imitating the sounds of a foreign language without actually knowing that language. So it may make a rational seeming argument, but add a lot of feminine emotional decoration, such as, I just know I'm right, and so on. The animus can go all out in this argumentative mood. It can really goad the man it's arguing with, and it can do it suddenly, out of the blue, without warning. It can be very shocking to the man when he comes up against the animus. He wants something soft and encouraging from the feminine. That's his anima's philosophy. Instead, he gets something hard and discouraging. It's confusing. And when a woman goes into her animus, the tendency is for the man correspondingly to go into his anima mood. And he's flummoxed by this impression of rationality with which he suddenly finds himself confronted. He loses his masculine, goal-driven, project-oriented, analytical nature and becomes disoriented, very sorry for himself. He retreats into, or is driven into, an emotional helplessness or a soppy attempt to pacify the animus. Or he may come out with sly, undercutting remarks, a kind of bitchiness, which is not at all what we normally think of as masculine behavior. Or he just gives up and becomes a cabbage, as Srimataji sometimes said of the modern Western man. Now, I would say, personally, that in the public sphere, this kind of animus possession was very clear in someone like Greta Thunberg. Not everyone would agree, but let me propose this idea. When she first appeared on the scene, she had this absolute assurance that she was right. She had this oracular and hectoring style. She knew everything there was to know about the climate, this immensely complex phenomenon. And this knowledge of hers gave her permission to be as aggressive, verbally and intellectually, as she liked, dismissing entire generations for being stupid and for destroying her dreams. And male politicians, public figures generally, reacted by slipping into an anima, sucking up this criticism, kind of, as if by fawning over her and agreeing with everything she said, they could somehow deflect her criticism from themselves, making it seem as though she wasn't really talking about them, but only about some other people who looked rather like them and had jobs like theirs and were the same age as them, but who obviously weren't them because they were so good and so right in their opinions about climate change. Children, as we learn in life, can sometimes be horrible, and when they are, they need somebody in a position of adult authority to correct them. But instead of doing that, these adults were treating Thunberg as though the voice of God was speaking through this annoying child. The very fact that she was so adamant, so absolutist in her opinions, should have told them there was something not right here. So just like anima possession, but even more so, this animus possession of women is a serious business because, according to Jungians, while the anima is an archetype of life, the animus is an archetype of death. What does that mean? Well, I'm not sure, but we need death as well as we need life, or the world will be chock-a-block with people. The feminine is life-giving. The woman brings life into the world and nourishes it. She creates relatedness, and she gives men purpose. I don't know to what extent women know that, but it's as with that old chivalric impulse, consciously or unconsciously, the man does whatever he does as a kind of offering to the feminine, to the animal. But the animus is an archetype of death because man, the masculine, is the hunter, the killer. I mean, obviously that differentiation between men and women was much clearer in more primitive times, but there's an element of it still there. And also, in a more sophisticated way, more modern way, the masculine is that aspect of us which undertakes the work of discrimination and clarification, of saying this, but not that, and so on. But also of constructing theories and concepts which are useful and necessary, but are, like the animus and anima, as concepts. They are dead things. So the animus can have a deadening effect, and that it takes us away, as concepts do, as thinking does, from the immediate spontaneity of life. So, I mean, that's what I'm doing here. I'm thinking aloud. And it is a kind of deadening thing, but we do need it to a point. So the animus wants to kill love. It can come up in a woman, making her overthink, telling her that she doesn't really love such and such a man. It was all an illusion. He's not her ideal after all. Her ideal is someone else, or someone like someone else. Of course, there's the possibility that actually this isn't her animus talking negatively, it's talking positively. But the point is that it's her intelligence, her own intelligence needs to be integrated so that then she can discriminate clearly and see what is what. So she has to bring the animus into the light. This is how Jung puts it, and see whether it's negative or positive in every particular case. What should the man do when suddenly confronted with the animus in a woman? Sometimes it can seem that the woman is half aware that it's not exactly she herself, but something within her, this animus, that is behaving so aggressively like this, and that what she is really trying to do is to goad the man into standing up for himself, for being a man. Or if she's not aware of this at the time, she will use this argument to justify her behavior later. She wants the man to stop being a cabbage, to show his power and shut her animus up. But from the man's point of view, that can prove an extremely high-risk strategy. It can backfire. So the best thing to do, as always, is to witness the animus, not react, silence. Leave the room with dignity, though you have to be prepared for a lot of, why don't you answer me? You don't have an answer, do you? That sort of stuff. But if the woman begins to see her animus objectively, then she can detach herself from it and integrate it. Of course, this happens naturally over time with most of us. Personally, I feel that much of feminism, I mean, it's not just me who feels this, but much of feminism is the work of the animus. There's a clue in the name. It's so one-sided, yet it lays claim to philosophical truth. The truth can't be one-sided, it's in the whole. Of course, some feminist agitation has had a point, obviously, no question, but mostly this comes, perhaps all of it comes under the heading of fair play, fairness. There's no need for it to be called by this partial name, feminism. So this kind of feminism doesn't have the possibility of creating harmoniousness within it. It's always against something. It tries to overpower the masculine rather than to integrate it. And of course, in doing so, it becomes its opposite. This is a very big problem in our world. If feminists only ranted and raved, it would be clearer that there is a serious imbalance here. It's not the answer. But the fact that feminism has acquired such an inarguable position in our intellectual life, so that it doesn't need to be emotional about itself. This is a measure of the problem. When I was in academia, all the lecturers in my department were feminists without exception, the men even more than the women. No one, no man would have dared to say, just hang on, what is this patriarchy nonsense? It wasn't even a matter of daring, in fact, because they were as if hypnotized. Intellectually, they were cabbages, while thinking they were very progressive, very radical and rebellious against the status quo and all the terrible iniquities of this modern culture. So there are also, as with the anima, times when the animus can turn against the individual woman. It can really torture her, telling her that she's useless, she'll never amount to anything, she's ugly, she's fat, she can't do this, she can't do that. It acts like a very negative father or a brutal teacher, and it can be really damaging. In such cases, the woman may have to give a sopt Cerberus, as we say, that is a small sacrifice to this animus, and say to it within herself, okay, you're right, I agree, but so what? I'm still going to do my best. Something like this is necessary because, as Jung puts it, the animus is a kind of god, and the anima are a kind of goddess, and they can't just be suppressed easily. They're too powerful. Mainly I've spoken of them rather negatively, concentrating on the negative side of them. But the anima and animus have vital positive functions. The anima is a soul guide. She connects the man to the unconscious. She's the muse of inspiration. She brings out his feminine quality of relatedness and his maternal quality of compassion, and she wants to be brought into the light of consciousness through integration. And much the same with the animus. Its function is to bring about a marriage of feeling and intelligence within the woman, enabling her to realize her full potential in the world. To finish with an example of someone with a reasonably integrated animus in literature, if not in life, could be Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice. Many people know that book. She's presented to us as a high soul, I would say, definitely, with the advantage of rare intelligence and a sense of humor to go with it. The humor softens her sharp intelligence and gives her an ironic detachment about herself as well as about others. But she immediately takes against Darcy, for whom she's destined, and not without good reason, because he strikes her as proud and rude, which he is. But she becomes excessively prejudiced against him, and in this state, her lighter side is attracted to the frivolous Wickham, who further prejudices her against Darcy by lying about him, and he turns out to be a real villain. But she's not that attracted to Wickham. In spite of herself, she doesn't fall in love with him. Recoiling from this old business, she matures. She meets Darcy again. Sorry to tell you all this if you hadn't read the book. And anyway, she achieves some self-knowledge which she lacked before. Till this moment, I never knew myself, she says. She doesn't fall in love with Darcy. There's nothing Wuthering Heights-ish about it. But we feel, always remembering this is just a book, of course, that there's the basis for a true love relationship here, which can bestow a benevolence, a benign feeling around itself into the society. So that's something about the Anima and Animus. I mean, I said something, it's a very long talk, I know. If we think about them too much, it can seem that all sorts of behavior are due to them, which isn't the case. Also, if we try to classify them into various forms too much, it just becomes an over-complicated, over-intellectual game. Nevertheless, as I say, I feel these concepts, or something like them, can be useful to us in our efforts to be introspective, to understand ourselves and the world more. So I'll ask Priti to play a talk of Sri Mataji's where she's talking a little bit about man.
Now, I would suggest that the whole thing comes up because you think physically I'm going to India. And that's why you are disturbed. And you are thinking that mother is going, so what will happen? If something happens to me, who will cure me? Or something goes wrong, what will happen? Now you are grown-up children. You are not that small. And I am not gone. I am much more here when I am not. You will see. So now you should decide one thing, that mother is gone doesn't matter. We are going to show her something special. By the time she comes back, she is going to see what we can do, what we have done in Sahaja Yoga, how we have become normal with people, and how we are getting other people to Sahaja Yoga. By God's grace now, so many things have happened that about Sahaja Yoga now, it might be published in 700 papers already. It's all done through God's grace only, but you have to desire, and it will work out. So first of all, improve yourself, improve your collectivity, try to be nice to each other. We are human beings, we are not donkeys or dogs. But we are not only human beings, we are Sahaja Yogis, we are sick. So develop that dignity and that love and that understanding, that etiquette of a divine force, that sweetness, that gentleness of a divine force. Of course, it does not mean that men should walk like women. You see, I have to always correct. Because if I say gentleness, then men will start behaving like women. Or if I say you have to be manly, the women become manly and the men become it always goes the other way around. Ladies should try to be more ladylike. They have to be more ladylike and men have to be manly. Like just now I said that you have to follow the man. That has to be. It looks decent for a man to be ahead of you and a woman to be behind. But she is the Shakti. She is the Shakti behind the husband. And she need not walk in front and show off and argue with him and put him down and put his hand like that and all that. She should not do. It is not Chris. It is Chris to behave like that. And then only with understanding and love we'll have good society. And that's why my wife says, so this is a very wrong idea. Some people are that if the wife says go to the north, they'll go to the north. They say go to the south, they'll go to the south. That should not be so. It doesn't suit man. One should behave in a way that a man is, and let them be men, and you have to be women. To be women is a very big thing. Your mother is a woman, you know how great it is to be a woman. And it's very great to be a woman because women have such powers. We have really, by competing with men, we have finished ourselves. So the two roles of men and women is like the flower and the fragrance. Which is higher? Flower or the fragrance? If there is no flower, there is no fragrance. But without fragrance, what is a flower? Or a beauty? It's so much inseparable. The fragrance and beauty and flower. In the same way, the flower shows, but who is the beauty and who is the fragrance is the wife. That is how it should. And then only people will respect you and your husband, and it is going to be much more easy. That's the way it works out very easy. If it is other way around, it will never work. So let it be worked out this way. And there is nothing like domination. Who can dominate your spirit? Nobody can dominate your spirit. But it is an adjustment. Because in the society, the man has to do all the outside work, and he is the kinetic person, and you are the potential energy. So the woman has to listen to man because she preserves her energy much more by that. And there is nothing like domination. Nobody can dominate. On the contrary, it's such a domination on the man that he just can't exist without it. He comes back home straight from the work. That's how you should control your husband. But control of love. As I control you with love, you should control with love. It's a question of how much you love, how gracious you are, how beautiful you are. Next time I come, I'm sure I'm going to meet great ladies and gentlemen, which I expected in England. And we are going to be on that level. Very nice, dignified, very serene, and not frivolous. Frivolousness is a very big person. You should not be frivolous. Neither you should be so serious that everybody gets bored of it. But you should be in the center. You must talk a little more. Those who do not talk, those who talk too much, talk less. So normalize yourself, however. Now any questions, please ask me, because today is the last day and I'm going tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock from my house and I don't want trouble.
So I think we'll go tonight straight into meditation. I won't say any more because I've spoken enough already. But just to say that my basic argument is that as well as meditation, we do need this introspective side, this trying to understand ourselves more deeply. Okay, so Srinathji, we'll go back to the music, Rag Bageshri. So here we are at the end again. I'm sorry that was such a short meditation, but I hope the information about the Anima and Animus will spark some useful analysis, self-analysis about ourselves and our society. So that's all for tonight. I don't have any little poems to read at the end, but I'll be back in a fortnight discussing some other subject, which I hope will be of interest and value. So thanks for listening. Jai Shri Mataji. See you soon.